Hey folks, it's Marvin Cash, the host of The Articulate Fly. On this episode, I'm joined by Atlantic Salmon Fly Tyer, Tom Herr. Tom and I discuss his journey into tying these beautiful flies, as well as how he uses them to support organizations like Project Healing Waters and Casting for Recovery. I think you're really going to enjoy this one. But before we get to the interview, just a couple of housekeeping items. If you like the podcast, please tell a friend, and please subscribe and leave us a rating review in the podcatcher of your choice. It really helps us out. And as 2026 approaches, just a reminder for our industry friends that the Articulate Fly offers consulting services. Whether you need help planning for 2026, help figuring out how AI can boost your bottom line, or just need help with some old school blocking and tackling, we would love to hear from you. Check out the link to our consulting page in the show notes. And finally, a shout out to our sponsor, Trout Routes. We all know streams are getting crowded, and chances are you're not the only one at your local access point. Get away from the crowds and busy gravel lots by using Trout Routes Pro with over 350,000 access points mapped across 50,000 trout streams and much more. Trout Routes has all the data you need to help you find angling opportunities that others will overlook. Up your game and download the app today. Use code ARTFLY20, ARTFLY20, all one word, for 20% off of your Trout Routes Pro membership at maps.troutroutes.com. Now, on to our interview. Well, Tom, welcome to the Articulate Fly.
Thanks, Marvin. Glad to be here. Looking forward to discussion.
Yeah, me too. And, we have a tradition on the Articulate Fly. We like to ask all of our guests to share their earliest fishing memory.
Well, so I wouldn't say actual fishing memory, but when I grew up and I was a young lad of maybe 5 or 6 years old, we lived in a development. It was like 50s style homes, and at the end of our driveway there was like a slight depression, and actually a puddle would form there at the end of a rainstorm, and you would often find me after a rainstorm sitting there with a stick with a string tied to it and cast into this puddle. So I don't know if that's an actual fishing memory, but and then I really had it bad because in the backyard where the Norway maple grew, there was no grass grew there, and I would dig trenches down through the yard there and run a garden hose and run water through there and set my army men up like they were fishing. So, but my earliest fishing memory was probably when I was 10 years old. My daddy, he had bought a brand new Volkswagen Beetle, 1967. And he loaded it up with a tent and fishing gear, and we drove to Clinton County in Pennsylvania, which was about, back then it was probably like a 6-hour drive, and with a canvas wall tent, and we fished for brook trout and with fly rods. So that's my earliest fishing memory that I can come back with actual fishing with my father. It was awesome. I mean, I felt like I might as well be in Alaska, when we were up there camping out. So it was a great time. So
yeah, very, very neat. And so did you stick with fly fishing, or did you have to kind of come back to it later in your fishing career?
I did. There was a couple times when I was in my teens, in my 20s, and where I may have picked up a spinning rod to fish for trout. I know from work, a couple of us would go to Potter County for the first day of trout season, and I'd have a spinning rod and fish with minis. But basically, it was always a fly rod, and for the past, 40 years now, it's been, I've had the fly rod in my hands. I never even really thought about any other type of fishing. So, fly fishing has been, my daddy fly fished, and he was my mentor back then, and that's where my love of fly fishing came from very early on, so.
Yeah, very, very neat. And obviously, you live and fish in kind of one of the cradles of American fly fishing in Pennsylvania, where there's some folks, other than your dad, that kind of helped your development as an angler.
Yeah, that's an interesting question, because what I remember, Marvin, back in the 60s and 70s in my area, as I was growing up through my teen years into my 20s, fly fishing wasn't really a thing in this area. Even though it was close to Carlisle and the Spring Creeks in Pennsylvania and Carlisle, where the legends, pushed fly fishing, it really didn't take off here. So, other than my father, I really didn't have any other mentors. I mean, He worked in the foundry as a molder his entire life, and during the week he really did have the energy, understandable with that type of lifestyle, to take me fishing. So I'd load up my gear and put it on my bike and ride a local stream. And I'm pretty much self-taught through fly fishing and tying. Now when I got my driver's license around 16 or 17, my whole world opened up then. But I really, other than my father, I really didn't have any strong mentors other than the books I read. I would read lots of fly fishing books. I'd go to the library and get books out. But other than personal mentorships, I never really had that other than my daddy.
Yeah, it's pretty neat too, kind of back in that time. I'm a little bit younger than you are, but the mail would come and you'd get Field and Stream and all these magazines and catalogs, and it was just awesome, right?
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. So yeah. I did one of the things that he did teach me that I still take to this day. And when I teach fly fishing classes, I always bring this up, and when I'm guiding, I always tell people this. It was always about the presentation. And he always told me, he said, it's about the presentation. Okay, it's not about the fly or the color of the fly. It's about the presentation. It's got to be dead on. And he said, think of yourself standing out in the middle of a field on a windy day, and a balloon's floating towards you in the air. And all of a sudden that balloon stops, or speeds up, or goes off the side. He said, you're going to think you're in the twilight zone. And he said, that trout is sitting there in the stream with his face into the wind, into the current, and all day long he's seeing all this debris float by him and nymphs float by him, and he's just sitting there picking them off. Now here comes your offering, your nymph. And all of a sudden it speeds up or slows down or goes off the side, he won't take, because it's not natural. He always said it's about the presentation. So, yeah.
Yeah, very, very neat. And so when did you kind of get the bug to start fly tying?
Well, that was soon after we returned from that trip in Clinton County. They took me on. And you mentioned Field and Stream. I don't know I think it was Field and Stream or Outdoor Life. They had like an insert in the middle of it that you could pull out. And it was like a paper type fabric that was in it, and it had all kind of neat stuff in it. And there was something in there about fly tying. Oh, that's pretty cool. So I walked upstairs and got into my mom's sewing kit and got some yarn and some thread and got a mustad bait hook from down the basement from Dad. And I wrapped thread around this hook and tied on this yarn, and that was my first fly. That's my memory of my very first fly I tied, So, yeah, it started pretty early at the age of 10.
Interesting. And so do you remember your first vise?
Yeah. So, so I actually tied, I thought it was so cool, fly tying. So, I tied, I got magazines and when Daddy would go hunting, he'd get the pheasants and the grouse, and I'd get the feathers from that and squirrel tails. That sounds kind of bad, but when we were driving down the road and there was a dead squirrel on the road, we'd jump out, cut the tail off. That was some of our fly time. That's how we got fly time material back then. But then I actually tied in hand because I didn't know about vices. I tied in hand, holding the hook in my hand for a couple years. And then I was down in the basement, and Dad's big old bench vise was there. And I thought, well, you dummy, why don't you just put the hook in there? And that way you don't have to hold it anymore. So Dad's big old bench vise that he used to sharpen motor blades was actually my first fly tying vise. and then from mowing some lawns, I did get, when I was 17 or 18, I got a Thompson Pro A vise, clamp-on type vise that I actually tied on for probably 10 or 15 years. So, yeah, but my first vise was Dad's bench vise that he had down in the basement. So.
Very, very cool. What do you tie? What do you tie on today?
Actually, two. I have a Regal Revolution that I tie on, and also for my artistic style ties and my classic Featherwings, I have a Cottarelli T-Rex. It's an Italian vise, and it actually has two jaws on it. And the reason it has these two jaws that some of the hooks that I tie on, well, a lot of the hooks I tie on are presentation hooks, and you don't want to scratch or finish on them. So these two jaws grip that hook in two different locations, on the bend, and you hardly have to put any pressure on the surface of that hook for it to hold steady. So the Colorado T-Rex is the one I tie my Featherwings on. So
got it, which is a perfect segue into my next question, which is you go from, tying yarn flies on mustad hooks in your hand to tying Atlantic salmon flies, and I would say there are a lot of people that are crazy about tying, but, very few of them get drawn into the world of tying Atlantic salmon flies. What attracted you to that?
That's a good question. So that's a very good question. So I guess what really attracted me to it is the color of it all. Like I saw these pictures of the Green Highlander and the Jock Scott and just the natural material that was used to tie these patterns just intrigued me so much. Like the married wings. How do you do that? How's all that done? And little did I know that there's such a huge learning curve to do it. And I guess that's what it was, the color and the techniques that I knew would be a learning experience for me to gain, and I just was intrigued by it all. So that's really what attracted me to it. All that was involved to tying this complex fly. I just needed to know how to do it. So yeah,
very neat. And so how long have you been tying salmon flies?
I've been tying salmon flies now for probably, I'd say 35 years. The artistic style where I kind of got away from, or freestyle, if you would, it's probably been like 25 years. And the reason I still tie the classic patterns, but I like to think outside the box, on my tying, and I would suggest any type of tire, whether it's tying bass flies or trout flies or nymphs or whatever. It's not necessary to follow a particular pattern that's in a book. Make it your own. And that's what I tell folks that I'm teaching tying to. You don't have to follow this specific pattern. Make it your own pattern and substitute, colors or whatever. And that's what I enjoy about the freestyle or the artistic style of feathering flies. So
yeah, it's neat too, right? Because it's the community that ties these flies, it's international and it's very close, even though it's very distributed. And I was kind of curious, so much has changed in fly fishing in general.
Yes.
In the last, I don't know, since let's say the movie came out. How has the Atlantic salmon fly tying community changed over that time period?
Well, Marvin, I'm not so sure. I've been asked that before, and I'm not so sure the community has changed that much. In the traditional sense of featherwing salmon flies, these timeless patterns such as the Jock Scott and the Green Highlander that have been there for centuries, and that's just a name of few. They're still being tied by many who enjoy dressing this type of fly, the traditional flies. And there are those in this community that's all they enjoy doing. And really, that tradition goes way back to the Victorian area. But the married wings and the feathers from these exotic birds, they were used to develop these patterns that are so well known today. So, but if anything has changed, I think it would be the influx of synthetic materials that are readily found now and are used at times to tie these types of flies. For instance, there's a common material, natural dubbing, that's used to build up the body of like the Green Highlander, and it's seal's fur. That's a natural material, and that's getting hard to find. Now, there are many substitutes for that, but there's a company in the UK, Salmon Fly Tying Materials, which is a fantastic company. They developed a really cool dubbing to imitate seal's fur. It's called Semper Seal, and it mimics the natural seal fur almost exactly as a natural. I mean, it's fantastic stuff. So if there was any change, I think that would happen in the community, I think that's what it would be, the influx of synthetic materials, and also those who are out there who are developing using like pheasant rump feathers and they're dyeing that in a way to mimic the more expensive feathers that's used in these traditional patterns. So they're doing a lot of that. So yeah, that's basically the changes that I would see that's happened over the years. So.
Yeah, and in terms of, technology, obviously we have things like YouTube where you can watch it on demand.
Right, exactly.
But, do you find that, because I know that there are kind of these gatherings that happen all over the world, are they happening more or less frequently? And are people embracing things like Zoom to be able to, not necessarily, to talk to someone in Scotland without having to go to an event maybe in Nova Scotia, for example?
Yeah, so I think people are using YouTube a lot more. I mean, there's great YouTube channels out there. Friends of mine have channels that show how to set a married wing, how to tie a complete green Highlander, and you're able to stop and start that as it progresses. But there's still nothing like going to a show and sitting across the table from somebody and having that personal connection. Like the Atlantic Salmon Fly International, it's held every 2 years, but that's held around the world, different locations, so you're not always able to do that. But usually at every fly fishing show that's run across the country, and the fly fishing show, there's one in Lancaster, there's one in Colorado, there's all across the country. There's usually a tyer there that's tying classic salmon flies, so one should be able to sit there and ask questions as he ties. So, yeah. So.
Yeah, there's really no replacement for, in person. And, it's interesting too.
No, there isn't.
Yeah. I mean, and, in tying books, for some reason, it seems to me they're hard to get them edited well.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of, either, in person is best, video is probably second best, and then books. But, if someone's like, I'm curious, I think I might want to kind of, try my hand at Atlantic salmon flies, what would be your suggestions for them to kind of break into the game?
Yeah, so that's a good question. So I'm currently mentoring a young lad who has tremendous talent in tying and great thread control, and he's all about this. The first thing I told him when he contacted me about this was to pick up books by Michael Radinchich. They're great reads. He has 3 or 4 books out, and he has it step by step. And find a mentor if you can close by that you can talk to, that you can sit down across with. That's not always easy because our community there's not many of us, and we're worldwide. If not, attend a show, like I said, where there's a tyer there that specializes in this type of tying. But basically, if you want to get into this style of tying, don't get into the featherwing styles where you marry feathers. There's salmon flies that are called hair wings, okay? And they basically use squirrel tail and black bear hair. But the body, the body build for on the hook shank mimics that of that classic salmon fly. In fact, there's a hairwing gold green Highlander pattern that's used, very popular for Atlantic salmon. It's much easier to tie that pattern in a hairwing than it is with a featherwing, but you're still able to develop the skill to build that body up as you would for a featherwing. So that's the best advice I can give to somebody. Don't start off with trying to marry feathers and set a married wing. Start with hair wings first and then go from there. So
got it. And I know, you touched on this a little bit earlier, and, a lot of people have probably read The Feather Thief, but, getting the original Victorian natural materials is difficult, either because the birds are extinct or the animals are extinct, or there are all sorts, I guess, of import and export controls on these things.
Right.
How do you solve that problem?
Well, yeah, I mean, I mean, the good part about that book is it served as kind of like a wake up call to our community regarding the source of the materials that we use and the harm by ignoring those ethical considerations when about obtaining them. But in saying that, I think that book delved into the feather underground, if you would, and illicit trade of rare feathers. And it kind of led some to infer that a large portion of this community that I'm part of participates in or condones this types of practices, but that's not the case. You know, the people who are involved in this type of underground, if you would, is a very, very, very minute part of this community. And, I tend to think that perhaps this book kind of can label us all as one group, but that's not the case. But having said that, as far as getting these materials, it is getting harder and harder and harder to find, Marv. I have enough that I've collected over the years to last me a lifetime now. I'm pretty fortunate in that way. But like dyed white turkey, which is basically the center tail of a white domestic turkey, and they raise these birds just for this type of tying, and then they dye them. I dye my own feathers, but it's getting increasingly hard to find. I mean, back in the day, when you go to a show, you could buy all you want. Now, you're lucky if you find any for sale at any shows, and on YouTube or on eBay, you're lucky if you find any for sale there. So, and the cost is getting higher and higher. So, but there's substitutes to learn how to tie these flies. You can use goose, which you can purchase at any fly shop. Okay, it's a little bit harder to marry together. Now, when I talk about marry, you're taking different strips of that feather and cutting the slips out, and then pressing them back together to form that wing. Goose works fine. It's a little bit harder to work with, but that's what I started off with goose. Travel to shows, talk to tyers, ask them where they source their material, join Facebook groups. There's lots of Facebook groups or social media groups that are centered around this. Don't be afraid, even though you're just starting out. We're a community, and we are begging to be asked questions. Ask questions when you join these groups. Where do you guys get your materials from? You will get answers. And there's some of us that will ask for your address. We'll send you stuff, because we want this community to grow. We absolutely do, and we want young folks involved in this too, because there's a lot of us that are getting up in age, and there's not many young tyers out there doing this type of thing. So don't be afraid to join social media groups and ask questions. So we're there. We're willing to answer any questions you may have and help you any way we can. So hopefully that answered your question, buddy.
Yeah, absolutely. And then also too, I know the hooks are not as hard, but I also know that there are hooks and then there are hooks. Right. Yeah. And so you can go to Feathercraft and you can get the eyeless, hooks probably from Partridge or someone like that. But then I also know, doing research for this interview, that you've got buddies in Japan that are making hooks. Yes. So, how does the hook trade kind of work into all this?
Yeah, I mean, there are commercially available hooks. They're called blind eye hooks, and that's how the hooks back in the Victorian age were that's how the flies were tied on. They're actually a hook without an eye. And to create the eye of that blind eye hook, you actually use the gut from a silkworm. They actually raise silkworms, and they pull the gut material, the testing material, out of this worm, and they dry it and they twist it together, and it creates a very durable, very strong twisted material that you make the eye out of. It's called a gut eye. So these hooks are blind eye hooks, and there are some commercially available hooks available to purchase. And there's hook makers out there, again, from Yasuhiro in Japan, and Yujiwabi from Japan also. But there's commercially available hooks, handmade hooks here in the U.S. that cost-wise, they're more expensive than your hooks you buy at the fly shop. They're about $8 to $10 a hook. So, but again, to get started in this, you don't need that blind eye hook. You can start on. I tell people, I say you can just get a wide gap streamer hook, and don't worry about that. Yeah, it has an eye on it, but don't worry about that. So you don't need these blind eye hooks to get started in this. So.
Got it. And so, you were tying classic Atlantic salmon flies for about a decade, and then you gravitated to, I guess, what people call freestyle, right? So not in a Victorian pattern book. What made you make that shift?
Well, that started, I guess I was flying somewhere, and I can't remember where it was, but I was at an airport here in Pennsylvania. And I was walking through the bookstore there at the airport, once you go through security, and looking for something to read on the plane. And here was Life magazine, and it had the greatest pictures of the year in history of life. And I was looking through there, and people say artists are kind of crazy. Well, I guess that's kind of me, but I saw this picture, that iconic image of Marilyn Monroe standing over that grave with her dress blowing up. And I thought, I wonder if I could tie a fly to mimic that. Seriously, that's what I did. So it was on my mind, and I came home, and I tied this fly. I call it Marilyn, and I still have it, and that was actually my first artistic fly. And since that time, I just like thinking outside the box, and almost all of my ties now, my freestyle is freestyle, because I just enjoy doing that. I haven't tied two of the same since I started doing that. Everyone's been different. So yeah, so that was actually my first one. So
very neat. I know those pictures are on your website, and I'll link to that in the show notes. A little bit more of an artistic expression, and you need the inspiration, and then you got to tie the fly. You want to kind of maybe walk us through. I know there's no typical freestyle fly, but walk us through kind of the process of the idea all the way to the finished fly. And I know you also mat and frame yours. Kind of take us through that whole process.
Yeah. So when I first started this, I come up with an idea, and on how I want this fly to look like, and some of it's centered around the hook that I have, the style of the hook that I have, or it may be the materials that I have, or a thought I may have, and I started doing pencil drawings, drawing this thing out, and on paper, and how I wanted it to look, and but after a while that just didn't work, because halfway through the tie I would change my ideas anyway, and then sometimes, Marvin, it's a matter of just putting a hook in the vise and just going with it, just tying and seeing where it goes. I just finished one for the lodge that I was at in Alaska, ATA, Alaska Trophy Adventures Lodge in Alaska, where I hosted a trip to. Just returned last week. Fantastic lodge, incredible experience. But I tied one there called the Alagnac, and I framed it and delivered it to him, and it's hanging in the lodge now. But that lodge, I had this image of the sunset on the Alagnac River with the lodge in the background, and it's a fantastic image. And I've had two Scarlet Macaw parrot feathers. They're very long, that I've had for like 14 years, and I just never had the right use for them. And I saw that color in that sunset, and Yasuhiro, a Japanese hookmaker, he had gifted me this one hook that was actually, I think it was like a 12-aught hook, a very big hook. And I thought those feathers, they're going to be perfect for this tie. And actually that one, I just put the hook in the vise, Marvin, and just went with it. I really had no idea. I just built it as I went, and it turned out pretty good. So, and another thing of it is, sometimes I have to ask my wife to come down and check colors, because I'm colorblind. So, believe it or not. So, reds and greens, I get all mixed up. So, but yeah, how I plan this out is my freestyle flies is sometimes there's a lot of thought goes into it, and other times I just go with it and see what happens. So, yeah.
Very neat and super crazy question. Do you ever tie Atlantic salmon flies to fish with?
I do. When I was up in the Miramichi, up in New Brunswick, there's a show up there, the ASFI, Atlantic Salmon Fly International. They invite 80 tyers from around the world to go. And I was one of 6 from the U.S. to go there and demonstrate salmon flies. And we were also going to be able to fish up there for Atlantic salmon. So I did tie some Green Highlanders, Featherwing style ties. I did tie some hair wings, but these Featherwing flies, when they're in the water, I mean, they just look amazing. They really do. I mean, there's a little bit of work that goes into them. Now when I tie them for fishing, I'm not putting as much detail into them, of course, but the married wings turns into kind of like a mixed wing, if you would, and it just lays down, and they just look amazing in the water. They don't mimic any natural bait fish, if you would, but Atlantic salmon, you're actually going for an aggressive strike, not a feeding type of strike. So, but yeah, I do tie them for fishing. So
very neat. And, it's kind of funny. Every time I get a serious tyer on the podcast, I always like to ask them if they've got a couple unique flying tips for mere mortals that we can use to improve our life at the bench and minimize frustration. And they can be Atlantic salmon tips or not Atlantic salmon tips.
Well, when I teach fly tying courses, I always tell the people, I said, there's one thing that you really need to learn to do, and that's called the pinch technique. I don't know if you've heard of that before, but you're basically bringing the thread up and pinching it between your fingers, taking a loose wrap down, and then, letting that, and then tightening up by letting that thread slip through your fingers. Because the thing of it is, you want that material that you're tying on that hook, whether it be setting a married wing or tying a piece of marabou on a tail for a woolly bugger. You want that material to do what you want it to do, not what it wants to do. And some of these materials have a pretty rugged personality that they fight you the whole way, and by using that pinch technique, you're placing that material on the hook where you want it. And by using a pinch technique, that thread is coming straight down on top of it. It's not allowing it to roll, if you would. So that's and every piece of material that I tie onto my one of my flies, even my freestyle flies, but some will take 20, 30 hours to complete. Almost every piece of material, I use that technique, the pinch technique. So, and then I've gotten questions about people on how to tie in like a married wing and some of these other materials. Nanosilk, a silk type based thread. Nanosilk is Semperfly's thread, which is, I think, the best thread in the market. It's a GSP type thread, and it's slippery, if you would, and it allows that thread to set that material without rolling it, if you would. So, I mean, those two things, using like a nanosilk from Semperfly thread on setting the married wing and the pinch technique. That pinch technique is crucial in any type of tying, whether it's easy tying or something difficult. So.
Yeah, absolutely. And I always know too that tyers are mad scientists. So I bet I bet you've got some kind of nutty tool that you probably made yourself that's on your tying bench. You want to share that with folks?
Yeah. So, it's called, it's a burnishing tool. Okay. And, I don't know if you've heard of them before, but I kind of made my own. So when I do the body on some of my flies, and some of them can get pretty intricate, I use a material called Japanese silk. It's actually silk, and when I wrap it on the hook, I use silk gloves because the oil from my hands can discolor it. And I was a electrical lineman in my past life. I got some rough hands, and it catches on them, so I got to wear silk gloves when I wrap it. But that shows every little bump in that body. And so I use a burnishing tool. It's actually a very, very smooth stone, like a long stone, if you would. And I rub that body. I actually put an underbody on it with Unisilk, and I rub that really, really hard the whole way around that hook to smooth it all out. And then when I put the silk on, I use that burnishing tool again, and I rub it really hard as I can, and it smooths everything out, makes it like glass. So that burnishing tool, if you would, is a tool that I can't live without when I'm tying these flies.
Hey, got it. And then do you have any other, interesting techniques or kind of new materials you're playing around with that you can share with our listeners?
Well, yeah, for my artistic flies, I use a lot of curls in some of my wingings, and I don't know if you've seen some of them, but that's basically using, when you take a pair of scissors, and people have asked me how I do that, and you open your scissors up, and you take that material from either a piece of goose or a couple strips of goose or a couple strips of dyed turkey. It's actually like curling a ribbon, like for Christmas time, but you got to use very gentle pressure, and that creates that curl, and then you got to, tie that curl in either on the body or married into the wing. I've also been asked, so when I marry a wing together and with different colors to create a wing, there was one tie that I did to honor a firefighter friend of mine, and the hook was actually gifted to me by Yasuhiro from Japan, and it's a red hook with some orange in it, and I wanted these married wings to curl, like flames coming off the hook. And I thought, how can I make this wing that I just married curl? Because it's not natural to do so, And I lost sleep over this. I thought maybe I'll use a curling iron. I'm not going to use hairspray. There's no glue or hairspray or anything used in any of these flies from any tire. So it dawned on me, and this is letting the cat out of the bag, I guess, but because I've been asking, this is the first time I really revealed it. But I came down and got my wife's iron that she uses iron clothes, and I put it on a hot setting. And I grabbed that wing and I curled it in my hands, and I rubbed that curl on the edge of that iron, and it stuck. And I thought, holy smokes, I've got it, but it slowly uncurled, back to its natural flat shape. It takes 4 times of doing that for it to stay that way. And that's how I curled my married wings. So.
Well, I'm proud of my powers of persuasion that I pulled that out of you.
Yeah.
So shifting gears a little bit. We were talking about this when we met each other in Lancaster.
Yeah.
Giving back is very, very important to you, and you give back.
Yeah.
On the water and at the vise by tying these beautiful patterns that you use for various fundraising and recognition purposes. Right. Where did that drive to give back come from?
Well, that came when I was a teenager, Marvin, and Daddy and I were out Splitwood and out behind the garage, and he was getting ready to retire. His arthritis he had rheumatoid arthritis in his hands, and he could no longer mold, so he went into like an office job, which he absolutely hated. So he was talking about retiring, and I said, so what are you going to do, Dad, when you retire? He said, well, I'm going to fish more, but he said, I want to help out around the community. And me being the teenager that I was, a punk teenager I was, I said, why would you want to do that? He looked at me and said, look, and I never forgot this. He said, look, if you have a gift or a talent that you could use that could help somebody forget a nightmare they might be going through, why wouldn't you do that? And that stuck with me to this day, and it's true. I've done projects for Project Healing Waters, red, white, and blue flies, and framed them, and for American Cancer Society, for Casting for Recovery. That's a great program for women going through breast cancer. I've done frames for them and local organizations here. There's an organization here called Millport Conservancy that raises money every year for to send to help protect kids in the area, and I always do a frame for them every year to raise money. So, yeah, I mean, and Daddy was right. I mean, this is when people think of fly tying, Marvin. It's all about fishing and everything else. But whether you tie a fly that can be framed or tie flies for fishing, you can take that dozen flies or 2 dozen flies and give it to a veteran, or give it to a lady who might be going to casting for recovery. We have this skill, like Daddy said, we have this skill that we can use to help somebody out. Why wouldn't we use it? It makes total. It doesn't make sense not to, and whether it be, and fishing too. I mean, if you're a fly fisherman, I mean, we have this skill that we can take people out, we can teach people, we can get involved with kids. There's so many opportunities in this pastime, whether it be tying or fly fishing, that we can get involved in the community in so many different ways. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting, because I was very lucky to have people around me when I was growing up that took an interest in me, and they were interested in the outdoors, right?
Yeah.
And, even though, I really learned fishing from my grandfather, right? And I have a picture here in my office of, we're fishing with a cane pole, and he's literally wearing, rubber wellies, and he's got an aluminum worm box on his belt. But I also had people that were like ornithologists. And for me, that kind of laid the foundation for me, caring about being outdoors and fishing. And, to your point, I kind of came back, to the outdoors probably in like my early 30s, and, fly fishing was very, very healing. And so,
absolutely,
and, on a lot of different levels, and kind of to your point, I got involved with Project Healing Waters and other groups, because I was like, well, if I can help other people have this feeling, I should do that.
Yeah. I was at an event, a Project Healing Waters event. And for those of you, I'm sure many of your listeners know what Project Healing Waters is all about, but it's an organization that's nationwide that arranges outings and meetings for disabled veterans. And the one outing I was on, I was with a gentleman, and we were sitting along the stream, and he said to me, he said, "So, don't you want to hear my story?" And I said, that's not what this is about. And he told me what he went through, and it's incredible. It's what he told me. But anyway, he said, "You know what?" He said, "This is the first time talking about it. This is the first time that I've been on the stream that I've actually thought about it." And I've heard that from women who are dealing with breast cancer and other veterans, that a common comment that they made to me, it says, "My gosh, since I've been out here, I haven't thought about any of that." That's what fly fishing does. That's what fly tying does, because you're so focused in on the moment that you forget about it all. I mean, running and jogging and bike riding, that's all, they're all good stuff. But I think it allows your mind to wander, where fly fishing, casting a fly rod and tying, you're just so focused and you're able to escape. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting too, because I think part of it is the fishing part, and it lets people think about when they were little boys, right?
Yeah.
Because I can remember like going to the outpatient clinics to recruit for our program in Charlotte, and you would just say, "Hey, you remember when you were a little kid and you caught your first brim?" And people would light up, and you just kind of had them right at that point.
Exactly.
Right?
Exactly. Yeah.
But yeah, it's a fantastic thing. And so, I know you live in Pennsylvania, and we're at that time of year where people start to think about, where they're going to be on the show circuit, in late 2025, early 2026. Have you made plans to either like be at the Fly Tying Symposium or to definitely be in Lancaster next year that you want to share with folks?
Yeah. So I'll definitely be in Lancaster, in the Fly Fishing Show in Lancaster. The thing with the symposium in November, that's the same weekend as my granddaughter's birthday, so I'm not going to do it. So that's why I'm not doing that. She's my little girl. She's a year and a half, and so she's a joy of my life right now. So I got 2 boys, and now I got a little girl that I'm looking after. So I won't be at the symposium. So. And I'm not traveling to the other shows just because of that reason. But I will be in Lancaster, and I would invite you all to look me up. I'll have a table there, and I'll be tying these patterns and marrying wings, and feel free to watch. Just pull up and watch and ask questions. I love questions. So Yep.
Yeah, and I love the Lancaster venue. I mean, you literally
Yes.
can get out of bed and put on your nice pajama bottoms and your slippers and go to the show, right?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
Uh, is there anything else you want to share with our listeners tonight? Like, do you have any events, fundraising events or charity events coming up that you're supporting with your patterns that you want to let folks know about, or you want to give a shout out to any of the charities you work with, or talk about any of your, teaching opportunities that are going on?
Yeah. So my teaching and my guiding this during the fall, I have cut back on because of babysitting my little girl, and but there is a Casting for Recovery event coming up where I'll be a stream guide here in September. And again, I mean, it's a fantastic charity. If there's any charity that anybody wants to support, is Project Healing Waters or Healing Waters and Casting for Recovery. They're fantastic organizations. And yeah, I mean, there's some local Child Unlimited chapters that I'm going to be giving presentations in at Muddy Creek chapter. I'll be talking about actually about my Alaska trip and how to do Alaska on your own and through a lodge. And then Donegal chapter Child Unlimited here locally in Lancaster coming up. I'll be doing the same program in December and one in September on steelhead fishing. So yeah, I mean, I'm not as busy as I once was because of my little girl, but I'm still busy. So
no, it's important stuff, and I will get links to all that stuff and drop it in the show notes for folks. And
great,
yeah, and Tom, if folks want to follow your adventures on the water at the Vice and in Alaska now, where should they go?
Yeah, I have a Facebook page. Just look me up, Tom Herr. You'll see I just created a video on my adventure to Alaska, which was absolutely incredible. ATA Lodge is a fantastic lodge to go to. It's in Bristol Bay, Alaska, and it's on the Alagnac River, and you'll see the whole video of the time we shared there. That's my Facebook page, and I have all my my ties in there, and I'm on Instagram too, Tom Herr 34, and also have a website that I update regularly. It's artisticflytying.com.
Well, there you go. Well, I will drop all that stuff in the show notes.
Good.
Awesome. Well, Tom, I super appreciate you taking some time out of your evening to talk to me.
Oh, this has been great. Thanks for inviting me, Marv. I appreciate it.
Yeah, my pleasure. I'll see you in March.
Okay, buddy. Take care.
Well, folks, we hope you enjoyed the interview as much as we enjoyed bringing it to you. Remember, links to all of this episode's sponsors are in the show notes. Check them out. Tight lines, everybody.